of those three drivers from a outsourcing perspective, we feel that they're pushing us towards, or the response to that is the utility approach. Not just a new way of outsourcing, but a different approach in getting data into the marketplace. So whereas an outsourcing approach would be around hundreds of people moving offshore, now we're talking about small expert teams leveraged across hundreds of clients, maximising the benefit, maximising the usage of the team, minimising the cost out to the consumers. Rather than price tags in the hundreds of millions, usage-based pricing. So looking to leverage that technology, leverage those people, and apply that not as a one-off. I don't have to make money out of client A or client B individually. I'm looking to provide that service across the community as a whole. It doesn't mean free of charge. That means across the community being paid a fair amount, leveraging my technology and staff, but being paid a fair amount for the management of that data. And also the participants in that potentially being paid for the usage of their data if they have sourced it in the first place. So outsourcing being treated as an event in itself, I think, again, we've moved away from that and more of an on-demand model. You, as users, should be able to log in, use the service, log out, and pay for that usage for that amount of time. One of our tools is a data dictionary where we describe all of the various vendor feeds, all the various fields within those feeds, and allow organisations to view that. That's something we're looking at where people can just log in, put in a credit card number, and take an hour's worth of viewing time, look at that data, and then move on. There's no need to have that long sales cycle. There's no need to have that intimate salesman turning up, if you like, on your door. If you want to use the service, if you want to understand, I want to bring a new product to market, for example, where can I source that data from? What's the definition of fields in that particular feed? I can go to our data dictionary, I can buy an hour's worth of time, and then I can get the information I want to move on. So that very much on-demand, agile approach to the service that you're after. Each transaction regarded as an anomaly is now moved to maximise the team, maximise the technology. If I look at our utilities businesses, we're looking to, as I touched on earlier, provide one technology platform that's utilised by everybody. So true multi-tenancy platforms, your data secured within its own tenancy, but it's one technology platform that I'm basing that on. And the final one where originally we look at outsourcing communities as not having that relevant business experience, again, putting expert teams, using expert technology, leading edge technology that's fit for purpose out there so organisations can subscribe to that. And they're also subscribing to best practice models, to global operating models, because that's what I need to operate to provide that service within the industry. So if we look specifically at a reference data utility, on the left-hand side, let's look at what you might call upstream, so originators, sources of data, and on the right-hand side, distributors, consumers of data. And traditionally, and to a certain extent today, we see individual partial solutions. So a BPO here, a BPO there, people working with the buy side or the sell side, some organisations being very specific with whether they're buy side or sell side in who they're looking to deliver a solution to, but they're not addressing the problem as a whole from a market standpoint. So the next step was we created managed services. So we started doing again piecemeal, onesies and twosies here and there, 2 or 3 organisations, but again not really addressing the problem, which is, it doesn't really matter how good my data is, if the counterparty to my transactions data is bad, I still end up with a trade break, I still end up with cost. So just concentrating on making my data good and saving 25–30% of my costs is one thing. The vast majority of my costs are, however, incurred in fixing trades. And me just having the right data isn't necessarily going to solve that problem. I need the market to have the right data. So we look at the next step, which is where I would say we are today, which is the declear utility working alongside the distributors, the aggregators, but looking to provide that data to the industry as a whole, as an industry utility. I think where it gets potentially interesting is if we were to look at the participants within that utility, whether ultimately that becomes a genuine industry utility. And we start to see the role of the aggregator, we start to see the role of the distributor change fundamentally within the marketplace. I don't think we're there today, but I think that's a potential consequence of, we're already seeing some moves, let's say, from the likes of the ECB, from various news reports as to EU investigations into Reuters and so on. I think there's a genuine possibility that an industry utility might take over in that regard and provide the data once to the industry as a whole. And what impact do we feel that utility approach would have? Well, if we look at various stats from the likes of Tower Group and so on, as I touched on earlier, the vast majority of costs are incurred in actual breaks within trades. So 16% of all trades break for one reason or another, 29% of OTC trades break. 45% of that 16%, if I can put it that way, break because of inaccurate reference data or different reference data across the counterparties. And then we start looking at the costs, and again, as you can see, and we've seen it before in the reference data industry, the front office might take one feed, the back office takes a feed from a different provider, and so on. The longer you leave it, no news here, the more it costs to fix. So if I can fix it in the front office, it's been researched that it's approximately $6 to fix that trade. If I'm going to fix it in the back office, it's $50. And that's where the vast majority of cost is incurred. It's not necessarily in the data management per se, it's in the consequences of not getting the data right up front. And that's where we feel the utility brings to the table, is by providing that data right into the front office or to ultimately the buy side, the hedge funds, the clients, and then feed it through the system, that we can eliminate some of the costs associated with breaks. So if we look at a typical trade life cycle, we know what happens to the data. We know it gets transformed from one particular flow to the next. We know we have to source it in different directions or in different areas. We then pass it to our trading and risk platforms. We look at affirmations, confirmations, settlements, and so on, all of which are consumers of data. And the trick is making sure that we get the data right in through the top, not necessarily trying to fix it at the bottom, where organisations like us, from a SmartStream perspective, have had a very good life indeed, reconciling unmatched data. If you then extrapolate that to the actual sort of market topology itself, just taking that previous slide, we're now looking at one node in one of those diagrams. The Fedwire topology is a typical diagram. Those are all nodes in the network. So we start looking at some of those areas around systemic risk. So why can't the market as a whole start using the same data, not just fixing data within an organisation? And again, that's where we feel the utility brings something to the table that perhaps just outsourcing doesn't.